Hi, Reddit. My name's Mark Henderson. I'm 34 years old, and I've always been the responsible one. You know that kid in every family who ends up becoming the default problem solver, the one everyone calls when their car breaks down, their Wi Fi dies, or they need a cosigner because this time I promise I'll make the payments? Yeah, that's me. My parents weren't wealthy, but they were solid people. My dad taught high school math for 35 years, and my mom worked at a dental clinic. We grew up with more discipline than luxury, and my parents drilled one lesson into me from an early age. If you can fix it, you don't walk away from it. That philosophy stuck. By the time I was 29, I had helped my parents pay off the last of their mortgage, bought myself a small but nice two-bedroom apartment in a quiet Indianapolis neighborhood, and was finally starting to feel like I had my life together. My younger brother Tyler got the easy charm and movie star looks. He was the kind of guy who could forget to pay rent for 3 months and somehow convince the landlord to thank him for the privilege. I, on the other hand, got the steady job, the thinning hair, and the moral compass. Dating wasn't easy. I went through a lot of women who saw me less as a partner and more as a safety net. The pattern was always the same. Things started sweet, then one day I'd find out I was essentially funding someone's personal growth journey. So when I met Rachel, I thought things would be different. She was 34, divorced, confident, with a sarcastic sense of humor that could cut through tension like a knife through warm butter. She had two kids, Ava, 16, and Eli, 14. She told me about them on our second date, and I actually respected that. There were no surprises, no hidden backstory, just honesty. She worked as an office coordinator for a dental group, and she had her own house, a small three-bedroom place she shared with her kids after her divorce. For 2 years, everything was good. We took things slow. The kids were polite at first, shy but nice, and I liked that Rachel seemed grounded. She wasn't the find me a man to fix my life type. Or so I thought. When we got engaged, we talked about living arrangements. I owned my apartment, she owned her house. Her ex-husband was still paying part of the mortgage through a divorce agreement, and she said she was considering renting the place out since it was too full of memories. That made sense to me. We agreed she and the kids would move into my apartment temporarily while she figured out what to do with her house. The key word being temporarily. Fast forward 3 weeks after our wedding. I came home from work on a Tuesday evening after a long day of trying to explain to a client why a shipping delay wasn't my personal moral failing. The moment I opened my door, I thought I had walked into the wrong apartment. There were boxes stacked everywhere. Kitchen counters, hallway, even the bathroom doorway. My living room looked like an Amazon warehouse that had exploded. Rachel's mother, Linda, was sitting on my couch, eating grapes and watching HGTV like she owned stock in the network. Ava was in my office setting up her ring light, announcing, "This is way better lighting for my videos," while Eli was sprawled in my gaming chair, controller in hand, surrounded by empty chip bags. I just stood there for a second, trying to process what my eyes were seeing. I asked, "What's happening here?" Rachel turned, smiling, like everything was completely normal. She said, "Oh, didn't I tell you? Mom's house needs fumigation, and the kid's house is being rented out for a few months. My ex found tenants already, so we'll all stay here for a while. Isn't this exciting?" I just stared at her. I said, "You mean all of you? Here? In my two-bedroom apartment?" She laughed and said, "Babe, it's our apartment now." I looked around at the chaos, my couch buried in laundry that didn't belong to me, my fridge stuffed with organic yogurts and kale juice that I definitely hadn't bought, and my dining table covered in beauty products and school books. I told myself to breathe. Maybe it was temporary. Maybe it would just be a few days, except a few days turned into a circus. Ava took over the guest bathroom like it was her personal salon. Every morning it looked like Sephora had detonated in there. Foundation smears on the counter, false lashes stuck to the mirror, hair straightener cords snaking across the floor. Eli was fine when he wasn't eating, which wasn't often. That kid could consume cereal like it was an Olympic sport. He'd leave bowls in random places, the coffee table, the hallway, once even in my closet because apparently the Wi-Fi signal was better there. Linda, meanwhile, had opinions about everything. My couch lacked lumbar support, my coffee maker didn't brew with enough flavor, and apparently my choice of curtains made the place look uninviting. Rachel just smiled through it all and kept telling me, it's only temporary. But temporary turned into weeks, and weeks started to feel like an occupation. I went from having a quiet space where I could unwind after work to feeling like an unwanted guest in my own home. Every surface had something on it that wasn't mine. Every conversation felt like I was intruding on a family reunion I hadn't been invited to. The first time I brought up money, I did it gently. One night after dinner, I said, "Hey, have you decided what to do with the rent money from your old house?" She didn't even look up from her phone. She said, "It's for the kids' future. You make more than enough for now." I just sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, thinking, so my hard-earned paycheck now funds your savings plan? But I let it go, trying not to start a fight. Then came the day that broke my patience. I was in the kitchen making coffee before work when I overheard Ava on FaceTime with a friend. She laughed and said, "Yeah, we're staying at my stepdad's for free. It's basically like our backup house." That word, free, hit me harder than it should have. Backup house. Like my home was some kind of Airbnb safety net. That evening, I decided enough was enough. I waited until everyone was home, took a deep breath, and said, "We need to talk." They all looked up, half interested, half annoyed. I told them, "This isn't a hotel and it's definitely not your free housing. You're guests here and I expect some respect for the space." And for me. Rachel blinked like she couldn't believe I had said that. She said, "They're just kids, Mark." I replied, "They're 16 and 14, old enough to know the difference between being family and being freeloaders." That's when Linda chimed in, clutching her cup of tea like a queen issuing a decree. She said, "You know, Mark, maybe you're just not used to sharing." I looked straight at her and said, "Linda, you've been sharing my couch for 3 weeks. Believe me, I'm getting used to it." The silence that followed could have frozen Liva. Ava's jaw dropped, Eli snorted, and Rachel shot me a glare so sharp it could have sliced concrete. The next morning, Rachel packed up the kids and said they were going to stay with her aunt for space. I thought it was temporary, that she just needed a few days to cool off. Instead, I saw a Facebook post later that day that read, "Sometimes people show you who they really are when you need them most." And suddenly, I was the villain in her narrative, the controlling husband who kicked out his wife's family. Now she barely answers my texts. Linda blocked my number, and Ava unfollowed me on Instagram, which apparently is the digital equivalent of a declaration of war. My coworkers say I was right to stand my ground, but Rachel's friends think I embarrassed her in front of her kids. I just wanted peace in my own home. I didn't yell, didn't insult anyone, didn't throw anyone out. I simply reminded everyone that this was my home too, and that respect goes both ways. But now I'm sitting in my half-empty apartment wondering if drawing a boundary makes me the bad guy. Was I the Ayixtiaiki hole for drawing a line? It had been about 2 weeks since Rachel and her kids left my apartment, and I'll be honest, part of me thought that space would bring clarity. I figured we'd both calm down, have a real adult conversation, and sort things out. I wasn't expecting flowers and forgiveness, but at least a normal talk. Instead, I got passive-aggressive social media posts, mutual friends giving me side eyes, and the eerie silence of a place that suddenly felt both peaceful and hollow. For the first time in months, my apartment was clean again. No cereal bowls, no ring light cables, no piles of laundry on the couch. But there was also an ache in the quiet. I didn't miss the chaos, but I did miss what I thought we had before it all went off the rails. Then, one Thursday afternoon, Rachel texted me. She said she needed to get her mail. I thought that was harmless enough. Then she added, "Also, can I grab a few things while I'm there?" I figured she might mean a sweater she left behind or maybe a pair of shoes, so I said sure. I got home a little early that day, expecting a quick 5-minute visit. Instead, I pulled into the parking lot just in time to see Rachel and Ava loading boxes into her SUV. At first, I just stood there, watching, because my brain needed a second to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. I saw my silverware set, the one I'd bought years ago when I first moved out on my own, wrapped up in towels and going straight into the back of her car. Next went my Keurig. The Keurig my mom had given me for Christmas 5 years ago, the one I used religiously every morning. They were moving fast like a tactical operation. When I walked up, the Rachel gave me a quick wave and said she was just grabbing a few things we bought together. I asked what she meant by we. She said, without missing a beat, that she had bought those items when we moved in together. I just stared at her because that was flat out false. That silverware set had been in my kitchen since before we even met. The Keurig was practically a family heirloom at this point, but she didn't even blink. She just told me I was being dramatic and that she wasn't taking anything that wasn't hers. Ava, standing there scrolling through her phone, smirked like the whole situation was some kind of joke. It hit me right then that this wasn't about stuff, it was about control. Rachel wasn't just taking a few things. She was marking territory, trying to rewrite the story so she didn't look like the one who walked out empty-handed. I didn't want to cause a scene in front of her daughter, but I made it clear that I knew exactly what she was doing. She rolled her eyes, said I needed to let it go, and kept packing. When they finally drove off, I stood in the parking lot, watching the taillights disappear, realizing that whatever we had left was officially gone. A few days later, the real punch came. A mutual friend of ours, someone who worked at the same dental group as Rachel, called me. She sounded uncomfortable but said she thought I should know something. Apparently, Rachel and her ex-husband had rented out their old house to a couple for double what their old mortgage was. Double. And they were splitting the profit. So while Rachel was telling me she couldn't contribute to rent or utilities because she was saving for the kids' future, she was actually running a side hustle with her ex. It got worse. The friend told me Rachel had mentioned that the plan was to save up together and buy a bigger house soon, with Mark's help. That's how she phrased it. With my help. I sat there on my couch, phone in hand, trying to wrap my head around it. They had a plan, and I was supposed to be the financial engine behind it. Except no one bothered to tell me I'd been cast in that role. The more I thought about it, the clearer everything became. The rushing to move into my apartment, the excuses about the rent money, the way she framed everything as ours when it came to my things, but mine when it came to her money. It all made sense now. It wasn't just chaos, it was strategy. She saw me as the next step in her financial upgrade. The reliable man with a steady paycheck and no kids of his own, ready to build a family future that looked suspiciously like her ex-husband's retirement plan. I gave it a day to cool off, then called her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult her. I told her what I knew, that I was aware she and her ex were renting the house for profit, and that I understood exactly what the plan had been. I said I wasn't going to fund her savings, her ex's investments, or anyone else's new house. I told her, you can save up all you want, but it won't be with my wallet. She didn't try to deny it this time. There was a long silence, just her breathing on the other end, like she was debating whether to fight or just hang up. Then, without a word, she ended the call. She hung up. It had been about a month since Rachel and I last spoke. Things had gone eerily quiet, the kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful, it just feels unfinished. I was still getting used to the empty spaces where her things used to be. My closet was half full again. My fridge contained actual food instead of overpriced kale smoothies, and my couch no longer smelled faintly of someone else's perfume. For the first time in a long while, my home was mine again. I thought the worst was over. I thought I could finally move on and start piecing my life back together. Then one afternoon while I was at work, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. The woman on the other end introduced herself as a school counselor from Eli's high school. She said she needed to confirm some information regarding his address and guardianship. At first, I didn't think much of it until she said, "You're listed as the primary address for both Eli and Ava Henderson. Is that correct?" It took me a second to process that. My apartment, my address, listed as their residence. I nearly dropped the phone. I asked her to repeat it, and she confirmed that, yes, Rachel had used my apartment address to keep the kids enrolled in the same school district. It turned out that after Rachel moved back to her aunt's house and then temporarily to her mom's place, the kids technically fell outside the district boundaries. Listing my address let her bypass that rule. She had essentially used me as a fake utility bill. I told the counselor the truth. I said Rachel and I were separated, that the kids didn't live with me, and that I had no legal guardianship over them. I even emailed copies of the separation papers and a few utility bills showing that only my name was on the lease. The counselor was understanding but said the school would have to update their records immediately. She thanked me for being honest and said she'd reach out to Rachel to clarify everything. I didn't even have time to set my phone down before it started blowing up. Rachel called first. Then came the texts, dozens of them, rapid fire. She accused me of ruining everything for the kids, saying they'd have to change schools now, that I'd embarrassed her, that I was petty and vindictive. She said it was for the children and that I could have just kept quiet. I stared at the screen, completely floored. I couldn't believe the audacity. I had spent months watching her treat my apartment like a free hostel, and now she was using my address to game the school system? I finally replied, telling her she had crossed every line there was to cross. I told her she'd ruined things long before I ever talked to a school counselor. I said she'd turned my name into a utility bill, not a marriage. And when I sent that message, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. It was like finally exhaling after holding my breath for too long. When I told my parents about what happened, they both just sighed in that we saw this coming kind of way. My mom said she always thought Rachel was charming, but had a way of turning everything into her advantage. My dad, ever the understated philosopher, called it a soft invasion. He said it like he was describing a military tactic. And honestly, that's what it was. Not a dramatic takeover, just a slow, calculated occupation. One couch, one laundry basket, one temporary arrangement at a time. The divorce went through not long after. It was cleaner than I expected, mostly because there wasn't much to divide. I had my apartment, my job, and my dignity, bruised but intact. Rachel moved back into her old house once the tenant's lease ended. From what I heard through mutual friends, she's doing fine. She went back to her old job, the kids are back in their district, and her mother still visits often to give unsolicited decorating advice. Some things never change. Ava predictably blocked me on social media. I can't blame her. From her perspective, I'm the guy who kicked them out and ruined their school plans. Eli, on the other hand, still follows me on his gaming account. Every once in a while, he likes one of my posts or sends a short message about a new game. It's small, but it tells me at least one of them understood I wasn't the enemy. Then one evening, I got an email from Rachel. It wasn't long or emotional. Just a few lines saying she thought we had different expectations and that she wished me the best. That was it. No real apology, no acknowledgement of everything that happened. Just that carefully worded phrase. Different expectations. I stared at those words for a long time. Because she wasn't wrong, technically. I had expected a partner, someone who'd build a life with me. She had expected stability, comfort, and someone else's wallet to fund her new beginning. So here I am now, single again, back in my quiet apartment, with a brand new Keurig sitting proudly on the counter. One I bought myself. I wake up, make my coffee, look around, and it's peaceful. Sometimes too peaceful, but I'll take that over chaos disguised as love any day. There's something strangely freeing about reclaiming your own space after someone else tried to rewrite your life inside it. When I think about it all now, it's almost absurd how fast everything spiraled. One minute, I was a newlywed, proud of the family I thought I'd joined. The next, my living room was a three-generation Airbnb with no checkout policy. My kitchen appliances were disappearing into someone else's SUV, and my address was being used as a school enrollment scam. It would be funny if it hadn't been my actual life. But if there's one thing I've learned from this, it's that love might be blind, but it should still read the lease.